It's fine. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Tired Science, in which I, your dear friend, who you may or may not have met, Katie Danis, explain to you, my fine friend, a scientific concept while absolutely exhausted. Last week, we talked about the immune system, specifically some immune responses to the herpes simplex virus type 1, or cold sore oral herpes. This week on the Vagilantes channel, our topic that we're discussing, oh my god, it's already starting. I'm already starting to not make sense. This week, the topic that we are discussing on this channel is climate change. And so here I am to talk to you, my fine friends, about climate science. So today we're going to do a little bit of climate science, so some ecology. We're also going to do some sociology because we are going to be talking about the correlations between gender and the effects of climate change. And this is going to be a super quick and cursory overview because there are so many relationships and so many studies that haven't been done. First of all, my research is limited, and second of all, my time is limited because it is very late at night. And so let's do this. Let's dive right in. Let's get this bread. Let's secure this coin. Let's gain this grain. Let's finagle this bagel. Let's secure this sourdough. Let's talk climate change. So one of the reasons why we decided to do this topic is because last week, about a week and a half ago, we in Europe had the hottest July temperature in the UK, I think, ever. Certainly the hottest day that I've been here. I believe it was the second hottest day ever. And it was the hottest June ever on record. And also, they just had the hottest day ever in Paris. It was the same day. So this, of course, sparked a lot of dialogue and discussion about why. Why are we having this massive heat wave? Why are temperatures going up? Why is this all happening? And is it related to anthropogenic climate change, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. So there are two kinds of climate change that we're going to talk about today. The first is natural climate cycles, also called climate oscillation. And the other type that we're going to be talking about, that I mentioned already, is anthropogenic climate change. And if we break down that word into its Greek roots, we have anthropos, which means human, and we have genus, which means offspring, like Genesis. So anthropos, genesis, anthropogenic. Did I say anthropomorphic before? I meant anthropogenic. Anthropomorphic is when you have like a talking animal in a movie or in real life. I think that's called a hallucination. Anyways. Today we're going to focus a little bit on anthropogenic climate change, which is human-generated climate change. So when we say climate change, we're often specifically referring to global anthropogenic climate change. So that would be differences in the climate over time that are caused by human activity, usually burning of fossil fuels that then leads to the trapping of greenhouse gases and the rise in average temperatures throughout the world. So one thing that I think is particularly interesting is the relationship between gender and the effects of anthropogenic climate change. And at first glance that might seem a bit strange, like where are you getting this correlation? Why look at these two variables? Because they don't seem that related at first glance. Because on one hand, you have, the construction of gender, and then on the other hand, you have different ecological systems. But gender and climate change are intricately related in a lot of different ways, a few which we're going to talk about. First of all, farming. Women compose 2/3 of all the farmers in the world, and 90% of farmers on the African continent. I was very surprised to learn this when I first did, because when we think of the word farmer, I don't know about you, but I generally think of this is gonna sound ridiculous, but an old MacDonald type character, because where I'm from, in the American South, we have this image of a farmer as this guy who goes out in the field and plants his corn or does whatever he does. I didn't grow up on a farm, that's not obvious. But a majority of the farmers around the world are in fact women. And that means that women are going to suffer disproportionately when agriculture is affected by differences in climate generated by human activity. And not only do women compose most of the agricultural producers in the world, but they do this agricultural production on the smallest and least productive plots of land. And so those plots of land are also going to be disproportionately affected by climate change. So one of the ways that climate change, anthropogenic climate change, can affect agriculture, for me, the first thing that comes to mind, as always does in any conversation, is chocolate. I'm thinking of a specific study that was done, or article that I read that I'm going to cite later when I edit this, in which a group of cacao farmers kept having to move to a higher elevation and a higher elevation as the average temperature went up in that area. And as the average temperature went up in that area, then that meant the climate in that area was no longer suitable for cacao farming. And so if you keep climbing to a higher elevation and higher elevation to try to match the rising temperature, rising average temperature, eventually you're gonna run out of up to go. And especially if you live in a place that's quite flat and doesn't have leeway to climb up and then kind of gain that ground over the temperature, then what are you gonna do? So we have that element of women being affected by climate change. And then another element that I wanted to focus on was nourishment. So even though women compose the majority of agricultural producers around the world, 60%, this is according to the UN, 60% of the world's undernourished population are women. So why is that? The root of this social issue may lie in gender roles. So women often eat least and last in a house. In a lot of cultures, men are the primary breadwinners, and then women are responsible for completing most of the domestic unpaid work and are often caregivers for the family. So if women are expected to be nurturers, it stands to reason that they would eat least and last. And I see this in my culture, absolutely. I see the pressure on women, especially mothers, to kind of give so much of themselves. So if you have those two separate social spheres, then there is kind of a cultural logic that follows that would lead to women being more likely to be undernourished. So we've got agricultural production, food insecurity, and then the last main point that I wanted to concentrate on in terms of this topic is, natural disasters. I wanted to talk about natural disasters. In 2007, these two dudes named Neumeyer and Plumper published a study called The Gendered Nature of Natural Disasters, and I'm going to link it below if you'd like to read it. But essentially, between 1981 and 2002, they studied the impact of catastrophic events on the gender gap in life expectancy. And what they found is that natural disasters were more likely to kill women than to kill men on average. One specific example that I think of when I think of this topic is during a monsoon in Bangladesh. More women died than did men because girls in Bangladesh aren't taught how to swim. And it's these kinds of cultural expectations that permeate our everyday life and our everyday ideology that really impact mortality rates of catastrophic events. If my house floods and I have to get out, but my clothes are soaked and my culture dictates that I can't go outside with soaked clothing or that I can't go outside without the company of a man, y'all, I'm screwed. What's a girl to do? And anthropogenic climate change makes these kinds of disasters more likely to occur, thus intensifying the gender-specific damage. This is a collection of essays by climate change activism group Extinction Rebellion, and I'd like to share with you a quote from an essay called The Climate Emergency and the End of Diversity. This is on page 70. Quote, "It's only recently that voices such as that of British broadcaster Sir David Attenborough have talked of the collapse of civilizations and societies, or what food insecurity will mean for us and for generations to come." In February 2019, Extinction Rebellion's Roger Hallam put it bluntly: "War, mass mental breakdown, mass torture, mass rape." Unquote. Reducing the effects of anthropogenic climate change is a group project. And if we continue as we are, we're all gonna get screwed. We're gonna get screwed over in different ways, and we're gonna get screwed over to different degrees. But if we fail, we all get the same grade in the end. I wish I had an inspiring quote to end on, and I wish that I had more hope to give you. But I think right now, my hope is that we can reverse the damage that's been done to our planet and to our species, and that we can prevent the effects that climate scientists have warned us about basically for decades, and we didn't listen then. I just hope that enough people are listening now. I wish I could tell you that it's all gonna be okay. I wish I could tell you that I know how this is going to end. I wish I could tell you that I or someone else had a plan for sorting this all out, but there's not, and I don't. So all I can tell you is stop watching. It's up to you now, and it's up to me. And I'm willing to do my part if you'll do yours. That's all I can hope for.